let's talk a little bit about the process of making a review. This one is entirely for those who are just curious, those who just want to know what goes into producing the reviews that you watch on channels like mine or anybody else's. And it all begins with the deliveries. Actually, no, it begins with the scheduling. So one of the hardest things for me, at least, I don't know how it is for other reviewers, but for me, getting the scheduling right is a bit of a nightmare. The way I try to run things at the moment is I'm now doing a cycle of a review every 3 days, and that cycle is manageable from a production point of view. The problem it creates, though, is when you get a new product released or a product's delayed. So, for example, I've just received the Susvara Unveiled, and I don't have it in my calendar, but I really want to get that one out soon. And so that means I've either got to bump back videos that I've already got scheduled and may have promised retailers or manufacturers that it's coming soon, or I have to produce extra content within a shorter time period. So scheduling is a bit of a challenge, but it's also manageable. It's not the end of the world. The next thing is the delivery, so just constantly receiving gear. My wife and I laugh that the house is a little bit like a freight receiving centre. It's just boxes coming and going constantly, which is a bit ridiculous, but it's also kind of fun because you're constantly getting new toys to play with. But then once we get beyond that, things become a bit more structured, a bit clearer. And the very first step in any review is obviously getting to know the product. And so whenever I get gear, the first thing I'll do when I receive a delivery is I'll open it up, I'll have a look at what it is inside to see what it is, get it scheduled, get it into my database of products. And often after that, the next step is for me to take it out and have a listen to it, which might happen immediately if it's a product that I'm excited about, or it might wait until normally a couple of weeks ahead of the planned review schedule, or release date, I should say, production date. So what that means is that if it's a DAC, a headphone amp, whatever it might be, I'll have it out, I'll have it in my system somewhere in my office setup, and I'm just using it day in, day out. And I'm not thinking about it in terms of reviews. I'm not thinking about how does it compare, how does it sound. Obviously, I'll be thinking, do I like this or not like it? Because with any piece of gear, the moment I connect it up, I'm just experiencing it and seeing if it floats my boat or not. But I'm not thinking about it in the context of a review. I'm thinking about it in the context of someone who loves listening to music through good or great gear, and whether or not that particular thing that I'm trying is bringing me closer to the music. And so that process can take anywhere from a couple of weeks. Sometimes it's longer if it's a piece of equipment I really enjoy using or have been excited to try. Particularly if it's headphones, they'll often get into the rotation pretty quickly, and I'll just use them day in and day out for a while. IEMs might be a little bit different, where those could be a little bit more put aside and saved up until closer to the review date, just because I don't use IEMs that often these days. But the gist of it is that I'm using them as a consumer type use in the lead up to the review. And the whole idea of that is that I don't want to make quick, rash decisions on any products. I might share some early impressions with channel Patreon members, just to say, hey, I'm trying this out, here's my early thoughts. But I'm always conscious to say that those impressions may change, because sometimes the initial style of a product might be really impressive, or maybe it's so different to what you've just come from that it can be a bit glaring and uncomfortable at first. So those first impressions often change, and it's why I don't think too much about whether I like a product or not in that early stage. Once the time of the review gets a bit closer, the next step for me is to sit down with it and really properly focus on it. So I'll cycle through a bunch of tracks. I might try a few different headphones or earphones, assuming it's a DAC or a headphone amp. Obviously, I've been listening to it on my speakers as well, if it's a DAC or a headphone amp or a streamer. And then that's when I'll also bring in the comparison products. So it might be products that are the same price. It might be products that I think sound similar, and that if you like this, you might also like that, but how exactly do they compare? Sometimes it's what you get if you go up a step in price or down a step in price. It all depends on the product. For me at least, there's no one constant comparison. It'll normally always include something at the same price, just to say, is this as good value as something that I think is excellent value at that price? But it's not only ever that. Sometimes I do more than that, as I just said. So that focused listening process, that will take, I would say, an hour to 2 hours for that really focused listening process, taking my notes, doing comparisons, all that sort of thing. And it varies from product to product. Some products are fairly quick. Others have more permutation. So that process, writing the notes and doing the focused listening, that will also include things like, if it's a DAC, do all of the digital inputs sound the same given a good quality input or good quality source? Do the different modes make any difference? So, if we think about some of the SMSL products that have got their sound color modes of transistor or valve mode, having a listen to those and seeing what difference they make, so I can share hopefully everything that I can possibly test with you in the review. I should take a step back as well. If it's headphones or earphones, there's also the measurements. So what I'll normally do, particularly with headphones, is I will take measurements the moment I take a headphone out of the box, and then I'll take more measurements just before the review. And that's just to see if over the use, the couple of weeks that I'm likely to have used it before the review, has it changed through burn-in? And over the years, what I've found is that some products do change with burn-in, and that's measurable and you can see it on the frequency response. Other products don't change much with burn-in, and some are in the middle in the sense that the character of their sound will change even though the frequency response doesn't change much. I think the biggest examples I've ever had of that were the HEADPHONE Aria, I think it was the Stealth. That thing just was dramatically different from the day I got it to the day I reviewed it. I really didn't like it out of the box. And then by the time I reviewed it, I absolutely adored it. And I think it might have been the Meza Elite was the other one that I was pretty underwhelmed at first, and then as time went by, it opened up. I don't recall now exactly which one was which, but I know there have been a couple over time that have really opened up with use. So that's something else that has to go on is the measurements. But coming back then, so I've done the measurements if it's a headphone or an earphone. I've done the general listening over a couple of weeks. I've done the focus listening, which is a couple of hours. And then the next step is obviously to write up a script. Now, I used to just write my bullet point notes during my listening process, and then I'd sit down and record based on those. I'd just look at them and I'd talk. What I found though was two things were happening. One of them, I was actually rambling a little bit. I was saying a lot more or using more words to say the same thing, and taking longer to say it. But also it meant that it was a fairly run-of-the-mill review in the same way that sadly most of us do, which is here's a product, here's the specs, here's how it sounds, here's the comparisons. And it's very formulaic, and looking back now, I should have changed it up a lot sooner. What I now do is I sit down and I actually script it. So for me, on a Monday morning, I take my son to kindy, and he's at kindy at the moment because he's just a little fella. He's there for about 3 hours. And so I sit at the local cafe and I write my scripts for the week. And what that allows me to do is to write the story of the review, and hopefully you're enjoying those stories. Hopefully it takes you on a bit of a journey. Sometimes I deliberately create some tension. Sometimes I just tell you how it is up front and then tell you why. I try to mix that up as well, of course. But the point is I'm now scripting everything so that I know what the flow of the review is going to be, and I know how the review is going to unfold, and it means I can actually be much more concise. So my new reviews generally are almost never more than 20 minutes, and yet I think I'm still providing all the same information I used to provide. I'm just doing it more efficiently. And that could be whether it's on-screen text or footage to show you things that I don't really need to tell you about. For example, in the latest review I'm producing right now, it's the Linear Tube Audio Aero DAC. I could have told you that it was a 6SN7 or 12SN7 tube DAC, I should say. But instead, I just show footage of the switch on the back that changes between 6SN7 and 12SN7. And I show some footage of the tubes where you can clearly read the label on the tube. So that means I'm not having to say it all, I can show some of it to you. So I'm aiming to show and tell, not just telling. So scripting, what I'm finding is the scripting is really variable. Some reviews write themselves and some take a lot more time. On a good day, I will get the script for 2 videos done in the 3 hours I'm at the cafe. And I do some emails and stuff while I'm there as well. So we're probably talking an hour to an hour and a half per video of scripting. It might be a little bit less if the video's an easier one. From there, I do the recording, and so for, let's say the video is 15 to 20 minutes long, that will normally require, depending on whether I'm tired and jumbling my words and mumbling and stuff like that, and I have to do retakes, generally I'll get through a recording in about 30 to 45 minutes for what's going to end up being about a 15-minute video. From there, I get to the editing stage, and that happens in 2 rounds. So round 1 is literally just flying through the recording and chopping out the mistakes, the dead bits. It's applying the color grading so that the footage looks right. That's probably all I do in the first pass. Then I do a second pass over it, which takes a lot longer, and that's adding in the B-roll, which, by the way, I haven't mentioned. I also have to film B-roll somewhere in there. What I'm often doing is recording some B-roll during my auditioning processes. So the footage of me listening to a pair of IEMs or headphones, or sometimes it's the footage of me setting up a DAC or a headphone amp or an amplifier. That's going to be done during that initial 2-week period. But then I'll also have to take footage, the close-ups, the glamour shots, if you like, of the gear. That's going to happen normally in between the first edit and the second pass on the edit. And that's because in the first pass, I'm able to sort of think through, what do I want to show, what do I want to make sure that you get to see in the final version of the video. So I'll get to the end of the first pass of the edit, I'll go away and I'll do my B-roll. That's anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour, depending on the product and how detailed it is, how many other products I have to show you alongside it. So 30 minutes to an hour of that. I then bring all of that back into the editing software. For those interested, I use DaVinci Resolve. I've recently upgraded to the paid version. The free version is amazing for anyone wanting to get into video editing. Just get the free version. But there is some features and functions that the paid version has that I now actually need and use. So the second pass edit, I'm adding B-roll, I'm adding text on the screen, sound effects, music obviously. The music choice sometimes takes a while. It could be half an hour of searching for the right tracks. Finding the right sound effects also sometimes, although I'm building up a bit of a library of my go-to sound effects. So I think the total editing process, by the time I do the first pass and then the second run, and then I do a little bit of a third pass just to put in things like chapter markers and the overlays of like the subscribe button and stuff like that, the reminder to subscribe. So the total editing process, I would say, is anywhere from about 4 hours up to about even 6 to 8 hours on a more complex video. And then at that point, I'm pretty much done. So from there, I export the videos. That takes ages, but I just set my computer up to do it, and then I go and do other work for my clients, or I'll just have a break, whatever's going on at the time. Sometimes I do it overnight. And then from there, it's uploading it, sharing it with, so when I schedule the videos, obviously YouTube channel members in the early access tier or above, or actually that's the only tier now that's at that level, so the top tier is early access. They get immediate access the moment I have uploaded and finalized the video description. They get access. Channel Patreon members get access through the Discord chat. I've put it in there for them as a link. And then once it's scheduled, we just wait for it to come out. What I haven't mentioned in there actually though is that somewhere in between I also have to think about the title of the video. I've got a separate video all about the titles if you're interested in how I'm coming up with my titles these days, what I'm sort of thinking about as I come up with titles and why I'm doing it the way I'm doing. And that's true for the thumbnails as well, although I don't put as much time and effort into thumbnails as I know some people do. For me, the thumbnails are pretty straightforward. I'll just take a screenshot, a still from the footage, chop myself out so it's just me on the screen, hopefully in some sort of situation where it looks interesting or like I'm engaged with you as the viewer, and then I'll find a picture of the product and some sort of wording to go on the thumbnail that will hopefully generate a little bit of attention and interest. So that's the process end to end. I reckon a full review end to end of a standard product, so something that's not overly complex, there's not too much to go through, a review that would probably last about 15 minutes of view time, it's probably around, and this is not including the 2 weeks or so in the lead up of just playing with the product. In terms of focused work time on the review, I would say it's probably, in fact, I'll tell you it up on screen. You'll see on screen by now how long the process takes. And I just share that with you for the sake of interest. Somebody mentioned the other day that they've been enjoying the behind the scenes side of things, knowing what goes into the reviews, the thought processes for a reviewer. That's really where this is coming from, is just to share stuff and hopefully it's interesting and informative for you. So I think that's all I can tell you about the review process. If there's anything I've glazed over or missed, let me know in the comments. I'll do another video like this one. And likewise, if there's a different topic that you want me to talk about, the behind the scenes, the ask me anything type stuff, then let me know in the comments of this video what you would like me to chat about next. For now though, I think that's it. So thanks everyone for watching. Thanks to channel members, Patreon members, those that send super thanks, all that fun stuff. And for now, happy listening, be kind to each other, and I'll see you here next time on Passion for Sound.